Good evening. I'm Jane Denning from Medusa Games, and I'm here with my husband Richard to talk to you today about one of the ways in which we can still play board games with our friends, even if due to the current pandemic it's no longer possible to just have a group around the table or meet up in a board game cafe or at a physical convention. There are a lot of different programs out there which you can use for this purpose, but the one that we're going to talk about, as it's the one that Medusa Games uses, is Tabletopia. So what is Tabletopia, Richard?
Right, well, this is Tabletopia here, and Tabletopia is a sandbox environment for running board games online. So this means they have taken board games, of which there are many, that have had this conversion done, and they are put into an environment where it is possible to manipulate them online. Now, the important thing about this, I say manipulation, and I say sandbox, what I'm meaning by that is that you are moving the elements around yourselves, physically around, as opposed to a computer doing it for you. So in Tabletopia, there is no AI running it. The game is not run by a computer that applies the rules. You have to know the game. On the other hand, you get this very much more tactile feeling than some of the other environments where you are moving objects around, as I'm doing here, and shifting my position and interacting with environments in the games.
You can even, if you really want to, flip the table, throw pieces at other players, and do all that sort of stuff.
There was an earlier version of a sandbox sort of thing, which is Tabletop Simulator, which many people are very fond of. Tabletop Simulator does require you to own the product to be able to play. Tabletop Simulator doesn't itself have a cost to own it. Anyone can just start it up. It's a browser. It's there on the internet, but you might have to pay a certain amount of money to access certain parts of the game. So if I bring up the charges here, these are the various charges for playing. Now,
this is for Tabletopia.
This is for Tabletopia, yes. So these are the charges for playing Tabletopia. So you have a fee depending on what level of access you want. Now, it starts as free. So at the basic level of Tabletopia, we have a bronze level access that doesn't require anyone to pay anything, and allows you to run 2 simultaneous games. So say you're wanting to have turn-based games where people take it in turns, maybe, and you can pause games and that sort of thing.
Yes, so they'll stay on there for weeks, won't they?
Yes, they will. Until you close it down, they'll just sit there, and you can go back to them. So you can have game night, and you can say, "Well, we're not finishing this tonight. We'll carry it on next week." And providing the host doesn't close the game down, then it basically it doesn't delete the game. Then it basically continues to run. At the top level here, there is this gold level, which costs $10 a month, US dollars, and that gives you 10 simultaneous game sessions. But the main important thing about the higher level accounts is this access to premium games. So with premium games, you have a lot more games available to you. So there are 1,242 games on Tabletopia at the moment. That is expanded immensely this current year, due to obviously the pandemic. When we started looking at this back in the spring, there was an awful lot less games.
Yeah, I think about 800 or so when I first looked at it.
But an awful lot more have been added on, and very much of that has been part of the reaction to the online conventions that have been running. So Gen Con Online, Virtually Expo, a Digital Spiel is coming up, and others, where a lot of these conventions are interacting with the publishers and getting them to get their games on Tabletopia, and then talking to Tabletopia. And often, if you go to the convention, you get free access to Tabletopia's premium level account for maybe a week, also in the case of Virtually Expo.
So in the case of Medusa, at the Virtually Expo, we use Tabletopia as a means of actually demoing our games to people.
So you'll see here that, for example, Everdell here and Orleans are premium level games, which means that you can't play these games unless you have a premium account. Premium members can invite non-premium members in as guests, however, into those accounts. Other games sometimes have free games, but occasionally with premium level to access certain parts of the game. So maybe certain player numbers are available for free, or perhaps certain scenarios or parts of the game require the premium level in order to access them. So there's a lot of spread of things, and things will change. Sometimes sometimes publishers will put games on for free for a while, and then put it onto premium, or have special offers when they come off premium for a period of time. So you have to keep an eye on that. Now, if you're wanting to play games on Tabletopia, you need one of those accounts, unless you're joining someone as a free as a guest, and that requires them to have a premium account. And you then have to go and find a game. So you can find a game in various ways. On the homepage here, there are various bits of news about upcoming or new games that have just come out, which is worth keeping an eye on. You can also find and play. Find and play allows you to look at people who have said that they're right now wanting to play games, so they've launched games and they're looking for people to play them. So there are 3 games there currently where people are looking for 1 free seat here, 1 free seat here, or 3 there. Or there are play later ones where people say, we're going to play a game at 9 o'clock tonight, who wants to play? And then there you can also see all the games that are in progress here. But if you want to launch your own games, then you go into all games here, and you can either browse around and find a game, or you can search for a game up here on the top right. Once you've found a game you want to play, you go into its lobby, which effectively is an environment where you can see all the stuff about the game. So you can see videos about the game over here. You can look at screenshots of the game. There are comments here, questions and answers, that sort of thing. There are the rules up here. There are setups for different levels for different numbers of players, and there is also links to the Board Game Geek, or maybe where you can buy the game elsewhere. Now, once you've decided to play the game, you have the option of playing it solo. You can play hot seat, or you can play online. So let's have a look at play online. Now, this has told me that I've reached the limit of open games, because I've only got bronze level player account here. So if I wanted to launch a 3rd game now, I'd either have to upgrade to premium, or I can close one of the previous games, which I will do there, and then I should be able to continue at that point. And in I go. Now, once I'm in this lobby, this game environment, I can decide on the number of players here, which will open up seats, and I can then share the information about the game that will get people into playing the game. The key bit is that they need to know the address of the game, or possibly the room number. If they're already in Tabletopia, it is sufficient to just give them the room number for this particular game, and you could paste that into something like Discord or Facebook chat, or anything where you've got some form of communication with them, or you can just read the number out to them over Discord.
And then there's also a link where you can put in, for people who aren't in Tabletopia at all. So at Virtually Expo, people came to our Discord channel, and then we'd send them a link, which would then take them straight into Tabletopia to our room.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at Great Fire now to show this process and things.
So I have an open room of a 2-player version of Great Fire, and what I'm going to do, because Richard's clearly already in Tabletopia, is read out the room number, which is #4 K Y W F T.
WFT. Yep, I can see that room. There we are. And as you see, as I type that in, it showed me the room, and now has given the option to join this room. So I will join the room again. I've got 2 games open, so I'm just going to close one of those other ones down and then continue, and I should be able to join that game now. There I am. So I will now just click the continue button, and we will be going into Great Fire.
Then the speed at which this thing loads up varies a lot depending on the size of the game. So I mentioned that some of our games have a lot of pieces. Great Fire is not that large on the system. Our largest game is Flying Machines, which really does take quite a while to load. So you do sometimes find if you want to play a game, if you're trying to load one with a lot of pieces, then some people's laptops or PCs might not be sufficiently able to cope with that, and you might have to change to a game with less bits, basically.
Just before we start this thing, I was realising just for a moment then I was showing our faces rather than the screen. So when Jane was reading out to me those codes, I just typed it into this box up here, and when I did that, it basically popped up with the room. So that's why you need to type it in. If you've got the full address of the game, which you can get, once you're in the game, you can get from the lobby as well. You can also paste the full address, and people can just link into that full address. So, if they're in Tabletopia, you can use the room. If they're not in Tabletopia, then you generally copy and paste the whole address into Discord, chat, or any other form of chat,
or an email, or anything
like that. Yeah. Okay, so here we are. We're in the game. So shall we look at how we interface with it? How we make things work?
Absolutely. So we've got a 2-player version of Great Fire here. So each of us has 2 sides. So I am the blue hand, which you can hopefully see moving around on your screen, and Richard is the green hand.
Yep.
So I'm looking after the blue and purple houses, and Richard's looking after the green and yellow houses.
Yep.
So
now, in terms of the environment, I can move the table around just by holding my right mouse button down and moving it around like that. So I'm rotating the table. That doesn't interfere with Jane's view at all. It won't do anything. I can also zoom in and out like that, so that I can hold the button. I can hold the left mouse button down and move it forward and backwards like that. So you also find that the sort of WASD keys that work in like first-person shooters, that kind of thing, also work pretty well, as do the arrow keys on a computer. So you can manipulate the environment to whatever environment that you want, and you can just get it right for gameplay. All right.
Yeah, so we've got a setup here. One of those of you who've played Great Fire will know that in terms of the setup, the 2 things are firstly laying out all of the houses, and then the second thing is making sure that the wind card deck is correctly stacked for the number of players. So the advantage of Tabletopia is that I want to play with 2 players. It is already stacked appropriately. If I'd gone in and asked for a 4-player game, it would have redone all of that, removed the 2-player specific items from the table, and redone the fire stacks in the appropriate way.
Absolutely. So in terms of actually, there's the great thing about Tabletopia is those setups, because particularly things like the stack scales, it takes a bit of time to do, getting all those houses out. This speeds up the whole process, and this is all randomised. All these houses are laid out in a randomised way. So you can interact with the pieces just by literally clicking on it with the left mouse button.
So I'm waving a purple house around in the air here.
Yeah, I can move my piece around. You can flip things like cards by just highlighting them, and if you just highlight one, click on them once, you can pull one card at a time off a little deck like that. Alternatively, if you've got a deck of them, you click and hold it down so it glows like that. You can actually move the whole deck around. You can bring the cards into your hand by bringing them to the bottom of the table like that. You get that little glowy line in your player colour.
And from my perspective, that deck of cards that you've picked up moved to the end of the table and then just disappeared. I can't see what that is now.
Yeah.
So clearly your objective cards, you can have them there, you can see them, and I can't.
So you see you've got your hand here. You can hide the hand, and you can bring it back into shot if it gets in the way.
And maybe I'll just pick up some cards and put them into my hand so that people can see that happening as
well.
well.
Yeah. See how they are there. Here's her hands. We can see those cards and things, but if she pulls them down to the bottom, they just bump. They disappear. So we can't see those. You have a bit of just a little bit of getting used to that. Sometimes the first time people do it, they tend to just drag it down and kind of leave it hovering somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So it's that business of getting to the bottom of the bottom of the screen. And then when things are in your hand, you can click on individual cards like that, and it'll go large, and you can also pull cards in together or individually back into play as you're playing them like that. So that's how things work with cards. Cards can also be shuffled. When they're in a deck like this, you can right click and you can just click the old shuffle, and that shuffles the deck once you get them back to normal again. And as you use cards up, this sort of deck function that exists in Simulator, Tabletopia rather, works very well, such as like that. And what's happening there is, as I play the cards, if I hover over the deck goes orange and bump in it goes, and it locks it into a nice deck which keeps everything nice and tidy.
So then another thing that we've got here is a bag. So this is the spare fire cones. They're all neatly in the bag, and you can open the bag and you can remove one. And in fact, I can also choose to remove more than one in one go. So there, I've got 4 now, and I can then move these fire cones around and plop them somewhere on the board.
Yep.
And you can also put things back in the bag if you've taken out too many or whatever. So that's quite a way of keeping things neat and tidy.
So there we are. So that's the sort of environment. Now, and we mentioned a couple of times a tabletop simulator, and this is a similar environment. It's a sort of it's almost a slightly older program. It looks a little bit of an older program in my opinion, but it does an awful lot of the same functions. With tabletop simulator, you do need to buy the program, and often you then need to buy the individual games and things to. Some of them come as large numbers of games in one go, or you can buy various add-ons to it. But it becomes the Tabletopia, I think, is a more accessible program because anyone can just launch up the browser and go and run the game as a guest as well.
That said, though, one problem with Tabletopia sometimes is whilst the rules are here, if you want to bring them up on the screen, it can be a little bit tricky to actually read them.
Yeah, so
if you haven't got a physical copy of the game and you're playing it for the first time, you might sometimes find it's better to go on something like Board Game Geek and download a Word version of the rules where you can bring them up easily, because the way that you have to load the rules into Tabletopia is not that sort of user friendly.
Well, also the little bit of a problem here is once it's in front of me like that, I can't also interact with the game. So normally when you have a set of rules, you have it in your hand, of course, and you've got the game there, and you're sort of looking at the set of rules and looking at the game and all this sort of stuff. So that is perhaps not as ideal as it could be, but it is accessible down there.
And the vast majority of games now, if you go on something like Board Game Geek, you can normally get a copy of the rules.
Get the rules. Little question mark thing there will bring up the shorthand of the various, the key of all the various commands that you can use and interact with the dice and cards and this sort of thing. So that's useful just as a quick reminder. Okay then, so that's just a very quick look at Great Fire.
Just one other thing before we leave it is just to say that, of course, those of you who have got a physical copy of Great Fire, you'll see that this is very similar, but it's not absolutely identical. And the main reason it isn't identical is because of the fire cones, which, as you can see, are not actually cones. And there's a story behind that one, Richard.
Well, yeah. So these in the physical game, these are cones, and these black firefighters, these trained band, are cones as well. They're hollow cones. And what normally happens is that you would hover over the cone would hover over the other cone, and you drop the one cone down, and it would literally plop. So the satisfactory sound onto the other cone
and completely cover it over.
And would cover it over, and that tells you that they are containing or fighting the fire. When we did the conversion for Great Fire, however, we found that you can't easily. bring in three-dimensional objects. Three-dimensional objects can be imported into Tabletopia, but you've got to have a fair degree of skill in the creation of the 3D objects. So the trouble I found is I created 3D objects, and my cones would just basically be lying on their side, and that is because I discovered that X, Y, and Z coordinates in the real world are not the same as X, Y, and Z coordinates on computer screens. In the real world, left and right is X, up and down is Y, and then Z is depth. Those Z and Y coordinates are flipped on computers, and that basically creates an environment which is confusing. They're different. I know you might have done the wrong way around as I just described them. But the point is they're different.
Anyway, but the other point was also Tabletopia. Until you get used to it, at least manipulating the pieces can sometimes be difficult. The problem is that lining something up to plop it on top is one thing, but trying to get a cone to fit over the top of another cone, we had a version of the game where you could do it, but most people, when they tried to play it, spent most of their time trying to pick up all the cones when they'd fallen over. So in the end, we just decided no, we'll just go for the cylinders.
You do have to make a few. Having said that, I have seen games that have had some very good 3D objects imported and if the publishers have got the skills and everything to create those objects and have them interact with each other. Normally the ones though that are imported are ones where they are simply pieces that are moved around the board. But where Tabletopia itself, who do have a very good support service and things, they say themselves is that interaction between three-dimensional objects is limited and still challenging in this environment. So we just had to make that compromise.
So as I say, it's a very good approximation to the game in terms of gameplay. Then if you play this game, you will get a very good feel for what actually playing the real board game is. But you do need to bear in mind that some of the components, etc., might not be 100% the same as the physical game. Although of course the rules that are supplied will have usually pictures of the actual physical components.
Yes, they will. Yes, but it just and so that's that. So now, what I think we will be looking to do in a future week, perhaps next week or the week after, is to look a little bit more detail about using Tabletopia for some other purposes, more to do with publishers' purposes. So rather than just doing the gameplay, so this is publishing final versions of games. You can also use Tabletopia to obviously get your games on, so they're ready to be played, but also have them play tested. And we've got a couple of our games already, playtest versions of our games, a future version potentially of a Great Fire game, and an expansion to 9 Worlds on there, which we are showing, and we'll probably spend some time in the next week or two showing those playtest versions and how we are using that to develop the game. But before we finish tonight, I suppose one good thing here would be to quickly show in passing how publishers do get their games on, and again we'll probably spend more time on this, come back to this in other weeks. But if you're a publisher wanting to get your games on there, you have to consider what level of membership again to have. So there is this basic level account here, which allows you to have one game you can create. You can have 2 setups for the games, and you can have a certain amount of storage. It doesn't allow you to have any 3-dimensional objects, however, and if you wanted to add music in and other things, you do need higher level accounts in order to have access to that. If you're wanting to add several games, 5 games or 10 games, you are going to need to look at the advanced and the pro versions of the accounts, particularly if you want multiple setups. So, because Great Fire, as an example, has has different version setups for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 player games, and we also had the game in English and German. We wanted to be able to do 10 setups for the game. And likewise, the other versions, other games that we had, like Nine Worlds and so on, we have multiple different setups and things. And so we wanted to allow those setups to exist. And so we've got the higher level, the Workshop Pro, in order to allow that to happen. But you can play around for free with the system to get used to it. You can be working on one game, you can have a prototype that you're developing without any fancy three-dimensional parts or anything like that, and certainly you can make quite a lot of use of it for free before you jump in at a higher level. So what you have to do when you're creating your games is work through the workshop. So the playground is for players and gamers. The workshop is for publishers. So having clicked on that, you can see we've got our 4 games here, and you can create new games. And when you create new games, you have to add in all the various descriptions and things. So let's just go into Nine Worlds here, and you are editing. When you're editing the game, you need to give it a name. You have to say what category it's in. You can say what ages, playing time, the descriptions, and you can link in things like, for example, any of the publishers or the artists and so on, and put gallery photos in and images, so that you that gets the game set up. You then have to create the setups. So these are setups that we'd already done for Nine Worlds. Each of these will have its own setup with different components used. So before you can do the setups, you have to get those components into the game. So you do that from objects. So objects are things like, if we go into Nine Worlds here, things like the avatar pieces, the bags, various markers, tokens, and so on and so forth. So when I create a new group, you can decide what the group's called, and you can put different objects into that. Once you've got an object group, as it were, like a marker group here. Here within that group, you can see all of these pieces that we put in there, and we can add new ones to it. We can either create objects and go off and say, well, that's going to be a token, and you give it a front and a back and so on, or you can go to featured objects, and featured objects are default objects that Tabletopia has built in. So to start with, you don't need to be thinking about importing your own art necessarily, or bringing in three-dimensional objects from outside. You can go and have a look at what Tabletopia have as a library of objects, and they've got a lot of stuff in there. They've got basically meeple shapes, they've got pawn shapes, they've got default dice and houses, which is great for Great Fire, and discs and all sorts of shapes and things. So you can get going quite easily just with their featured objects. But sooner or later, you're going to want to create a card, say, and you're going to need to bring into that card front art and back art. So you go away and you browse go and browse for the front art of that card and the back art from your computer, which hopefully, if you've got a game already made, you'll have the print ready files. If you're using this as a prototype, you will just bring in whatever you've got, and you can fiddle around with the sizes and things and give it a name.
It's probably just worth saying at this point that this is something that publishers can do.
Yeah.
What you can't be doing is just taking a game that you happen to have on your shelf, making photographs of it and uploading the things into Tabletopia, because you have to have the rights to the game in order to be doing
publishing
that.
the games on Tabletopia, you have to have the rights to the games, so you shouldn't be bringing in artwork and things from existing games. So that's really down to the publisher to do that. You can, however, bring in games from prototypes you're making yourself, and you've got complete rights of. So once you've actually done all of that, you're going to go in and you're going to create a setup. And just to give you a very quick, before we finish off, example of a setup here. This is one which we did for Nine Worlds that allows any number of players to use any of the various components. So rather than a setup for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 players, this allows people to use start with any of the 9 worlds, use any of the avatars, any of the colours
Yeah.
that they want to do.
Yes, because in 9 worlds in particular, with 9 different colours, certain people find certain colours harder to distinguish or whatever. So if our presets don't suit you, then that's a way of going in and using your own.
When you're in the setup, you're going in, and all the objects that you created earlier are down here, and I'm just dragging them onto the table. I can drag in a background. This thing in the background is called a skybox, which is a sort of 3-dimensional surround to the game. We can make a nice little background, and you're literally bringing in the pieces. So here are the bags. Go into the folder with the bags and drag and drop the object onto the table. So that's how you create the setup. So first import them all, get them all ready. Open up a setup which will literally be a black empty space with a black sort of table in the middle, which you then start bringing stuff into. And then once you've done it, you can publish the game here. I'm just going to exit so I don't override that setup. And the game will publish and will basically be then made available. Now, you don't have to make the game available publicly to start with. When you first start doing this, you can create these play zones down here, and the play zones will allow you to just start up any of your games, and then you share this link here, this playground link, as a private room, and your play testers can then access that private room and can play the game. And so you use these play zones to basically get the game ready. And once your game is ready, you contact Tabletopia and you say, I think I'm ready to go here, and they will check the game for you, ensure they're happy with the quality of it, make any suggestions or tweaks or changes to it that are needed. Now, if all of that seems way too difficult for you, and actually, I'm not particularly technically skilled, I managed to get all these games done, but if all of that is a bit more than you want to do, then what you can do is to ask Tabletopia to do it for you, and they charge, I think it's $300 to do a game conversion, and obviously that will then be done with high quality end results. So we will probably look at future weeks at some of our prototypes and show people how a little bit more detail about how you make these games, but also we'll play some of our own prototypes and show you the progress that we're making on them at the moment.
Okay, so I think that's all we were going to say today.
Yep.
It's goodbye from us, and
yep.
I hope you all have a very good week. And we'll be back here again next Sunday.
Goodbye.